Feats are some of the most important tools that can help strengthen your characters in Baldur's Gate 3, as they are essentially character features that grant unique abilities or bonuses which improve a character's abilities in specified areas. Once a player reaches class level 4, 8 and 12, they can choose to take a feat instead of increasing their ability scores. Do note that fighters and rogues also gain access to bonus feats, with the fighter gaining a bonus feat at level 6 and the rogue gaining a bonus feat at level 10. With that being said, hello everyone, my name is Dark Hero, and in today's video I will be ranking every single feat in Baldur's Gate 3. I will be ranking them from worst to best, with the D tier being the not recommended feats, C is reserved for situationally good feats, B is for the feats that are actually quite good but they could be better and there are better alternatives, A is for very good feats, and S is for the must-have feats. Even though there really aren't any must-haves, this is a role-playing game after all, so just take whatever you feel like is going to be better or more enjoyable for you. So starting off with Actor, with this feat your charisma increases by 1 to a maximum of 20, and you also get to double your proficiency bonus for deception and performance checks. This is very much a role-playing feat, so if you like your character to be the face of the party, to be the one that interacts with most NPCs throughout the story, and you really want the most opportunities to see the various different dialogue options, then this is a feat to take. That being said, I believe that raising your charisma to a good enough level like 16, maybe 18, is probably good enough, especially if you have someone in your party that has guidance or barding incantation to help you with those performance and deception checks. So personally, I'm actually going to start off the list by placing Actor in not recommended, because again, I think that there are just so many other ways that you can increase your charisma, and they're still going to prove useful in various different other scenarios. Next is Alert. You gain a +5 bonus to initiative and cannot be surprised. Personally, I really am a big fan of Alert. It's a surefire way to make sure that the characters that you need to go first in the initiative order get to do it, and being unable to be surprised has actually saved me a couple of times in Baldur's Gate 3 in just the first chapter. I'm sure a lot of you guys know which encounters I'm talking about, and Alert has proved to be very useful there. Sure, it doesn't grant you any higher stats, it doesn't increase your damage output, nor does it increase any proficiency bonus, but just being able to go first in the initiative order means that you get to knock out an enemy before they even get the chance to deal damage, which means your healer can then take another action, so they can be more offensive. So in my opinion, Alert ends up being deceptively very good, which is why I'm going to place it in the A tier as a very good feat. Next on the list we have Athlete. Your strength or dexterity increases by 1, of course to a cap of 20. When you are prone, standing up uses significantly less movement, and you also get the benefit of your jump distance increasing by 50%, which I think really is the highlight of this feat, as increasing your strength or dexterity by a single point isn't all that impressive, and personally I would rather take an ability score improvement over Athlete. It's not very often that I find myself being prone, although there is one boss fight at the end of chapter 1 that did make that a bit hard for me. But honestly, I don't see a good enough reason to be using Athlete, unless you want to do something very specific with your jump distance. But hey, at least you get to increase your strength or dexterity by 1, you get to choose, which is pretty convenient. So I'm going to give Athlete the benefit of the doubt, and I'm going to place it in C as a situationally good feat. Next on the list is Charger. You gain the following weapon attacks. Charger, which lets you charge forward and slam your weapon into the first enemy in your way. You use this as both an action and a bonus action to charge up to 9 meters and make a melee attack that deals +5 damage. Keep in mind that Charger does not provoke opportunity attacks, so that is a very good way of closing the gap between you and an enemy. You also get Charger Shove, which makes you also charge forward and shove the first enemy in your way. The shove distance is going to depend on your strength as well as the target's weight. I feel like these moves can be very good in certain specific scenarios and if you have the right character for it. I'm picturing, for example, a raging barbarian that likes to go into the middle of the frenzy, and this is a very good way to do so. However, having to use both an action as well as a bonus action is a bit of a steep price in my opinion. especially when in the case of characters that I believe would be best at using this, like for example, a barbarian, a paladin, or even a monk, those characters like to use both their action and bonus action a lot. So I think that Charger ends up being a very resource heavy feat, which is why I cannot place it any higher than C tier. Next on the list is Crossbow Expert. When you make crossbow attack within melee range, the attack rolls do not have this advantage. Your piercing shot also inflicts gaping wounds for twice as long, with gaping wounds of course making it so that attacks against this creature deal an additional 2 piercing damage. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of this one because it's not very often that my long-range characters get to go into a melee combat scenario. And if that's the case, in Baldur's Gate 3 you always have the option to switch to your melee weapon without having to spend an action or a bonus action to do so, which is what you would normally have to do in D&D. So because you don't have that extra condition to pull out your melee weapon and attack the enemy that is near you that way, I personally don't see the reason why you would use Crossbow Expert. I think there is a much better feat on this list when it comes to ranged combat, which we'll talk about in a moment, but for this one, I really don't think I can recommend Crossbow Expert, even as someone that has been using a ranger since the start of my playthrough. Next on the list is Defensive Duelist, a feat that I love using for flavor, but one that I don't think is all that amazing. So when you are attacked while wielding a finesse weapon you are proficient with, you can use a reaction to add your proficiency bonus to your armor class, possibly causing the attack to miss. Now keep in mind that Defensive Duelist is a reaction. Not only that, but if you don't make it so that the game asks you whether you want to use Defensive Duelist or not, it will automatically trigger in attacks that would miss even if you didn't use Defensive Duelist. And again, this is going to take up your reaction, and you may have much better reactions like for example Charm that you get from your illicit powers, not to mention opportunity attacks, and so many others. I'm someone that has a character that has a single finesse weapon using the dueling combat style, and still I do not take Defensive Duelist because while it is situationally good, I think that there are much better options out there. And I don't think it's quite good enough to be considered a good feat, so I'm going to place it in the C tier. Next on the list is Dual Wielder. This feat allows you to dual wield weapons that aren't of the light trait, and you also gain a +1 bonus to your AC while wielding a melee weapon in each of your hands. And of course you cannot dual wield heavy weapons even with this feat. Personally, I don't find this feat to be all that good. I've used it before on my barbarian, more so for flavor than anything else, because again you can still dual wield as long as the weapons you're using are light. By taking the dual wielder feat you are going to see some improvements to your damage output. I cannot deny that, as weapons that aren't light are more often than not going to be of a higher dice than the light weapons. So on average you can expect to deal a little bit more damage with dual wielder. But personally, I think you would be much better off taking so many other feats that are present on this list, but still I have to recognize that Dual Wielder is a feat that, in my opinion, is good enough to be in the B tier. Next on the list is Dungeon Delver. You gain advantage on perception checks made to detect hidden objects and on saving throws made to avoid or resist traps. You also gain resistance to the damage that is dealt by traps. Personally, I find the Dungeon Delver feat to be one that is very good for a roleplay type character, but here in the case of Baldur's Gate 3, it's very easy to have 1 or 2 characters that, even if they don't have high perception, because you have 4 characters in your party at all times, whenever you encounter a trap, it's very easy for at least one of them to detect that the trap is there. And sure, you may not have advantage on those perception checks, or even the saving throws by not taking this feat, but it's not like those traps are going to be all that deadly. Like, even at a lower level, most traps in Baldur's Gate 3 don't pose that much of a threat. And even if a party companion happens to die, for example, it's not like it's hard to make money in this game to be able to buy the scrolls to revive them. I personally really don't recommend taking this feat in Baldur's Gate 3, and keep in mind that Dungeon Delver does not give you an advantage whenever you're disarming a trap. It's only advantage on noticing the trap or resistance to the damage dealt by the trap. you don't even get to disarm them with advantage. I cannot stress this enough, I really do believe that this is a waste of a feat in Baldur's Gate 3. Next on the list is Durable. Your constitution increases by 1 to a maximum of 20, and you regain full hit points each time you take a short rest. Now, having increased constitution is quite good. It's always good to have more health. But I also find that a lot of times whenever you take a short rest, you're probably going to be at full health or very close to it. And if you're not full HP, you probably have a leftover potion, a druid that can make some good berries, or a bard or a cleric that can heal you up. Because in my opinion, if the entire party is devastated and everyone is badly hurt after a big combat, then you are more likely than not going to take a long rest. And it's not like it's hard to get the resources to get a long rest in this game. You can very easily hoard campment resources and never have to worry about having enough to do a long rest. So I really see this as a non-issue, even though getting 1 point in constitution is something nice at least. But then again, you could always take an ability score improvement and simply put 2 points into constitution, which I would argue would do you much better. So having said all of that, I'm going to place Durable in the not recommended tier as well. Elemental Adept makes it so that your spells ignore resistance to a damage type of your choice. When you cast spells of that type, you cannot roll a 1. And of course these elements are Acid, Cold, Fire, Lightning and Thunder. Now I'm a bit split here, because I could see this potentially being a very good feat to take if you know what kind of environment you're going into. For example, if you are in the Forge in the later stage of Chapter 1, you would do well to take on Elemental Adapt Fire. If you're fighting spiders, you would do well to take on Elemental Adapt Acid, for example. So if you know which environment you're going into, and if you're going out of your way to respec your character, and make sure that you go back and change the feat depending on the environment you're in, then this feat can be extremely good. But if you're not doing that, then I don't think it's going to be all that amazing. But then again, you could simply be, for example, a wizard that is focusing on fire spells. And if that's the case, you can simply go all the way through with fire spells and not have to worry about enemies resisting the fire element. So I could totally see it being very good in that scenario. You would be more limited in the scope of the different elements that you have available at your disposal, but then again you would be much more powerful in that aspect. So having given it a good thought, I'm actually going to place Elemental Adept in the B tier as I think it is good, but could also be better. Next on the list is Great Weapon Master. And boy oh boy, if you know this feat, then you know what's coming next. So, when you land a critical hit or kill a target with a melee weapon attack, you can make another melee weapon attack as a bonus action that turn. Now, the second side of this feat makes it so that attacks with heavy melee weapons you are proficient with can deal an additional 10 damage at the cost of a -5 attack roll penalty. And you get to choose if you want this to be on or off. And if, for example, you have a fighter that has access to Action Surge, and once you're level 5 you also get extra attack, you get a ton of damage that is available at your disposal from this feat alone. And you may also have some characters that are able to buff up your character, so that the attack roll penalty you get from Great Weapon Master doesn't end up mattering all that much. Again, the -5 attack roll penalty may sound like a huge deal, but because you can toggle this on and off at will, you don't have to worry about it. You simply have the option to, when you want to try to deal more damage, you toggle it on and you deal more damage. Personally, I think that this is without a shadow of a doubt one of the very best feats in the entire game, and so Great Weapon Master is going right into the S tier. Heavily Armored makes it so that you gain armor proficiency with heavy armor and your strength is increased by 1 to a maximum of 20. Now, in ordinary D&D, I would classify this feat much higher than I'm going to rate it here, because the thing about Baldur's Gate 3 is that you can very easily multi-class into a different class. In D&D, you need to meet the requirements of your primary ability. For example, to become a paladin, I believe you need to have a strength of 14 or higher. And to become a warlock, I believe you need to have a charisma of 13 or higher. But here in this case, You can simply pick any class you want to add to your character, and of course that means that you're also going to get the armor proficiencies they come with. So if you really want to have heavy armor proficiency, why not respec your character, start off as one of those different classes that gain access to heavy armor proficiency right out of the gate, and then multi-class into the class you were originally going to go. Maybe you do that with a couple of levels of fighter and you get access to action surge. Or maybe you do that with a couple of paladin level to get divine smite. Or a single cleric of life level so you get a bunch of spell slots and some healing spells as well. Again, if all you want to do is get your heavy armor proficiency and you also get the bonus of increasing your strength, then this gets you covered. But because it's so easy to respec and start multi-classing in this game, I really feel like heavily armored ends up being a bit worse than it would otherwise be. So although I see the benefits, I don't think it's all that good, and so I'm placing it in the C tier. Next on the list is Heavy Armor Master. It also increases your strength by 1 to a maximum of 20, but more importantly, the incoming damage from non-magical attacks also decreases by 3 while you are wearing heavy armor. Now 3 damage matters a lot at the start of the game, and as you get to the later levels, it starts to matter much less because of course you have a lot more HP. But still, I think that this is a pretty solid feat to take if you already have heavy armor proficiency, which as we just discussed can be very easy to get. And not only do you get to increase your strength, but it also helps alleviate the stress of your healers, so they have to spend less actions or bonus actions aiding your party. So with all of that, I'm going to place Heavy Armor Master in the B tier. The next feat is Lightly Armored. Lightly Armored makes it so that you gain armor proficiency with light armor and your strength or dexterity increases by 1 to a maximum of 20. So this one is very similar to Heavily Armored, of course, but you get to choose between strength or dexterity. Now here's the thing, I don't really know what classes would want to get light armor proficiency and don't already have access to it. It's very easy to get light armor proficiency, and a lot of classes that don't get access to it can very easily also get medium armor proficiency, which I think would be better in most scenarios. There might be a couple of very specific things you may want to do, maybe with a monk or perhaps even a wizard for example, but I just don't see the reason as to why you would use this. So much like with Heavily Armored, it's going into the C tier. Up next is a pretty cool feat which is Lucky. You gain 3 lucky points which you can use to gain advantage on attack rolls, ability checks or saving throws, or make the enemy reroll their attack rolls. Now this feat is of course very much reliant on RNG, but it also makes it so that the outcome of certain scenarios, especially when the situation is very dire, can go your way. With Lucky you can turn a bad scenario into a good scenario. You can force that to happen. And that can be very clutch in a variety of different scenarios in Baldur's Gate 3. I just added Lucky to my Barbarian and this thing has saved me so many times. Whether it's an attack that I end up missing because my rage is on cooldown, or an attack that is going to hit me and put my character down, or even an ability check in a dialogue. Lucky can help you with all of that. And again, you gain 3 luck points that you get to use, and they recharge on a long rest, so it's not like you need to be all that careful with them, as it's very easy to get the resources to do a long rest. I'm not gonna say it's a must-have, but it's definitely a very good feat, so it's going to be in the A tier. Next on the list is Mage Slayer. When a creature casts a spell within melee range of you, you have advantage on any saving throws against it, and you can use a reaction to immediately make an attack against that caster. Enemies you hit have disadvantage on concentration saving throws, so it is the perfect tool to use against mages, especially ones that use concentration spells. Now this feat on paper is very good, as concentration spells tend to be the ones that give you the most trouble. Think for example Hold Person. If you were able to negate that or at least have advantage on the saving throw and also hit the enemies with disadvantage on their concentration so that if they use Hold Person on an ally for example, you can easily break it, that would be wonderful. But how often are these enemies casting concentration spells within melee range of you? More often than not, they try to get away from you before they actually cast their spells, because maintaining concentration is a very big deal. So on paper this is very good, but in practicality it doesn't come up as much as I would like it to. But still, the effect can be very good, and when this works, it's going to be amazing. You may even get to save huge headaches just by using this feat. So I think I'm going to place Mage Slayer in the A tier. Next on the list are Magic Initiate Bard, Cleric, Druid, Sorcerer, Warlock, and then Wizard. Very simply, you get to learn 2 cantrips and a level 1 spell from each of their respective spell list. You can cast the level 1 spell once per long rest, and your spellcasting ability for all 3 spells is going to be dependent on the class you choose. So for the Bard, the Sorcerer, and the Warlock, it's going to be Charisma. The Cleric and the Druid are going to be Wisdom, and for the Wizard, it's going to be Intelligence. In my opinion, Magic Initiate is very hard to rate, because it depends on the build that you're trying to do, and the spells that you want to add to your character. Of course, the quality of spells also differs between these ones. For example, in my opinion, the Warlock and the Wizard get some of the better cantrips and spells, and being able to add Eldritch Blast, for example, could be a very good option to, I don't know, a Bard, for example, because of their charisma. There's just a lot of good options here, and above all, it's the flexibility that Magic Initiate provides to your character, and I think that in an open-ended game such as Baldur's Gate 3 and, by extension, Dungeons & Dragons, this matters a lot, and as such, I'm actually going to place Magic Initiate in the A tier. The only reason why it doesn't get to be in the S tier is because it's very easy to multi-class in this game, so a lot of times you can very easily get these spells, and a few other extras by just multi-classing. Next on the list is Martial Adept. You get to learn 2 maneuvers from the Battle Master subclass of the fighter, and you regain the expanded superiority die after a short or a long rest. Now, these combat maneuvers are absolutely amazing. If you've played a fighter, then very likely you know how good these can be, with disarming attack, pushing attack, and trip attack being, in my opinion, the 3 best maneuvers to choose from, as trip attack will make the enemies prone, pushing attack will allow you to move the enemies and sometimes even push them off edges, but maybe you want to get a melee combatant away from your healer so they can move away from them without triggering opportunity attack. Menacing attack can also be good by inflicting fear on the enemy, and then there's some other good ones which are a bit more niche, like for example Riposte or Rally. Evasive footwork is a pretty fun one, and disarming attack is also quite good by making it so that the enemy can drop their weapon. Unfortunately, with Martial Adept you only get a single superiority dice, which is very unfortunate when as an actual fighter you get way more of these. And also again, because it's so easy to reclass and because fighter is such an appealing class to multi-class into just to get action surge, for example, maybe you want to get into the 3rd level of fighter just to get Battle Master Fighter, so you get to use your superiority dice more often and get 3 and not 2 battle maneuvers. Personally, that's what I've done with my ranger, and he's become a killing machine, being able to push off enemies off ledges from a distance or make them fall to their knees with trip attack. I'm a bit indecisive on this one because you only get a single superiority die, but because these maneuvers are so good, I think I'm still going to place it in the A tier. Next on the list is Medium Armor Master. When you wear a medium armor, it doesn't impose disadvantage on stealth checks, and the bonus to your armor class you gain from your dexterity modifier becomes +3 instead of +2. Now this one is actually much better than all the other Armor Master in my opinion, because not only are you improving your modifier, with you getting a +3 to your AC from using medium armor instead of +2, but it also removes the disadvantage on stealth checks that is innate to medium armor, which means that if you are a rogue and you haven't multi-classed into anything, you can still use medium armors and get a good benefit out of it by choosing this feat, which I think is perfect because medium armor also tends to have more AC than the light armor, which means this feat is simply going to make it so you dodge more attacks. It's a lot more appealing than all the other ones, and while I don't think it's quite good enough to reach the A tier, I think it warrants placing it at the top of the B tier. Next on the list is the mobile feat. Your movement speed increases and difficult terrain doesn't slow you down when you dash. If you move after making a melee attack, you also don't provoke opportunity attacks from your target, and that is a very big deal. This second paragraph is a huge part of why you should take mobile. This is the perfect option for something like a rogue or a monk that they get to jump into the fray, they stun a target or assassinate an enemy, and then are able to quickly get out of the way without provoking an opportunity attack and without needing to use a bonus action like disengage. They're simply able to move out of the way and not get hit. I don't think there are many classes that can take advantage of mobile, but the ones that can makes them extremely powerful. Personally, I think that if you're playing a monk, you should always take mobile. I really do believe that. So having said all of that, I think I'm going to place mobile in the S tier. Next on the list is moderately armored, which is the same thing as before, gives you medium armor proficiency, but this time around you also get shield proficiency, and you get to increase your strength or your dexterity at your choosing. This one is going above the light and heavy armors, simply because you get the benefit of the shield, but it's not good enough to be placed any higher than C tier. Next on the list is Performer. You gain musical instrument proficiency and your charisma increases by 1. My question is, do you want to be a performer with a character that is not a bard? That sounds like a very odd choice. You could always be, for example, a bard paladin. And by being a bard, you simply have access to musical instrument proficiency. So I really don't see the point of having this, and personally I cannot recommend it in any way. It's not that it's bad to be a performer, it's that you can already be that with a bard, which is the class that wants to be a performer. So why would you choose this? I really cannot recommend it, and so it's going into the D tier. Next on the list is Polearm Master. When attacking with a glaive, halberd, quarterstaff, or a spear, you can use a bonus action to attack with the butt of your weapon, which will deal 1d4 bludgeoning damage. You can also make an opportunity attack when a target comes within range. So think of it as the opposite of the traditional opportunity attack, but this one you get to enjoy a lot more as a melee character, especially if you're using a weapon like a glaive, which has extra range. Personally, I think Polearm Master is fantastic. If you're a character that uses any of these weapons, I think it's a no-brainer. It makes you a lot stronger, a lot more active on the battlefield, and the enemies have to be a lot more careful about the way that they traverse the map. And for example, you can position yourself in a way that the only way the enemies are going to reach your healers and the rest of your party is by going through you. And so they need to get within melee range of you, at which point they will take damage from your Polearm Master opportunity attack. I've been using this a lot on my Hexblade Warlock, and it's simply fantastic. It may only be a combat feat, but it's without a shadow of a doubt one of the better ones, so it's going to be in the S tier. Next on the list is Resilient. You get to increase an ability by 1 and gain proficiency in that ability's saving throws. This can be a very good way of fixing a deficiency with your character. Say for example you have a 9 in charisma, this would be a surefire way of turning those bad charisma rolls into good charisma saving throws. Then again, there's the argument that you could simply build your character better, or have your character set up so that it has a dump stat and you don't worry about it at all. I can see Resilient being quite good in the right scenarios and with the right characters, so I'm going to place it in the B tier. Next on the list is Ritual Caster, which will allow you to learn 2 ritual spells of your choice. Keep in mind that ritual spells are spells that you get to cast that do not use up a spell slot when they are cast outside of combat. And the spells that you get to choose from are Speak with the Dead, Find Familiar, Long Strider, Enhance Sleep, Disguise Self, and Speak with Animals. Personally, I think that the spell list is quite decent, but out of all of these ones there are 2 that definitely stand out, those being Speak with the Dead and Speak with Animals, because of the roleplay aspects of Baldur's Gate 3. Speak with the Dead is going to be a very useful spell throughout your journey in this game, and the thing is, Speak with the Dead is a level 3 spell, which means that ordinarily you would need to spend a level 3 spell slot in order to cast it. But with Ritual Caster you don't have to worry about that, you can use this as much as you want and you don't need to worry. You can use this without having to worry about your spell slots. And the same thing goes for Speak with Animals. Now, I'm not sure if you can cast Speak with Animals on other party members, but if you can do that, that means that the character that can have these abilities does not need to be the face of the party, and so if a dialogue option presents itself, you can give Speak with Animals to the character that has the most stamina in your party, you would not have to waste a spell slot, and you would be open to so much more dialogue in the game. The more I think about it, the better it sounds. And so I think I'm going to place Ritual Caster in the A tier. Next on the list is Savage Attacker. When making weapon attacks, you roll your damage die twice and use the highest result. It's a very simple feat that is quite simply going to boost the damage of your characters. That being said, how good Savage Attacker is also going to depend on the die of the weapon attacks that you have. Where I think this would be extremely useful would be in the case of a fighter, for example, where you get action surge and then on level 5 you get extra attack, and so you get to attack a ton of times, and every single time, Savage Attacker is going to make sure that the highest result out of the 2 die is the one that you get to use. On a character that doesn't have a high damage dice, this is going to be a lot less useful. Savage Attacker also doesn't increase your odds of hitting the enemy. It doesn't help with advantage or disadvantage, and so there's a bit more that I think people could ask in regards to Savage Attacker. It leaves you wishing a bit more in my opinion. But still, because it can be so good in the right characters, I think it warrants placing it in the A tier. Next on the list we have Sentinel. When an enemy within melee range attacks an ally, you can use a reaction to make a weapon attack against that enemy. Note that the target ally must not have the Sentinel feat. You also gain advantage on opportunity attacks, and whenever you hit a creature with an opportunity attack, it can no longer move for the rest of its turn. This is incredibly useful in a variety of scenarios. This is the perfect way to make sure that a big bad enemy does not get anywhere near one of your other party members. You can simply put one of your big tanks near it, give them for example a glaive or a halberd so they have more reach, and you become an immovable wall that the enemy has to take down before they try to attack the rest of the party. It's an insanely good feat that is very easy to use well, and so I don't think I can place Sentinel anywhere else other than the S tier. After that we have Sharpshooter. Your ranged weapon attacks do not receive penalties from high ground rules, meaning that the height difference between you and your target is of at least 2.5 meters. In addition, your ranged attacks with weapons you are already proficient with have a -5 penalty to their attack roll but deal an additional 10 damage, so think of it as the Great Weapon Master feat. Now in case of the Sharpshooter feat, I don't think you can toggle the -5 penalty to the attack roll, but at the same time, I feel like I always have a very high attack roll whenever I use a ranged weapon on my ranger, for example. And that would be the perfect type of character that would take advantage of the Sharpshooter feat. And for example, if you're playing a fighter and you take the archery fighting style, you can increase your accuracy, and so the -5 attack roll is not going to be such a big penalty. As for the high ground and low ground penalty, this has come up more often than I would like, and while I still don't have a lot of mobility on my ranger, this ensures that my attack roll is not going to be lower, simply because the map for the boss fight I'm in decided that the boss was going to be at the top and me and my party at the bottom. So having said all of that, I think Sharpshooter is going to be ranking in the S tier along with all the other combat feats as well. Next is Shield Master. You gain a +2 bonus to dexterity saving throws while wielding a shield. If a spell forces you to make a dexterity saving throw, you can use a reaction to shield yourself and diminish the effect's damage. On a failed saving throw, you only take half damage, and on a successful saving throw, you will not take any damage. Situationally, this feat can be incredible, but it is entirely reliant on dexterity saving throws. And from my experience, that's actually the saving throw I've seen the least, maybe apart from wisdom and intelligence. The part that even if you fail the saving throw means that you only take half damage is very good, so you know that even if it doesn't work out, there's still a saving grace. But because it is so situational, I'm going to place it at the top of the C tier as a situationally very good feat. Up next is Skilled, which gives you proficiency in 3 skills of your choice. This can be a very good feat when it comes to plugging holes in your character, or if you want to change something about it, maybe for flavor reasons, or you want to roleplay a bit more and you want to max out your persuasion, something along those lines. Gaining a +2 in any of these skills is quite nice, and you're essentially getting a +6 in your skills with all the flexibility in the world with this single feat. So I don't think it can be denied that it is a very good feat. I just don't think it's quite good enough to reach the S tier, and so I'm going to place it in the A tier. Up next is Spell Sniper. You get to learn a cantrip out of all of these ones, and the number you need to roll a crit with this cantrip is now 19. And the cantrips on the list are actually quite good. You have Bone Chill, Eldritch Blast, Firebolt, Ray of Frost, Shocking Grasp, and Thorn Whip. All of these are very good in my opinion, with of course the standout option being Eldritch Blast because of Eldritch invocations, which can make this a whole lot stronger. I can see this being a very good option for a character that might be missing a range damaging spell, or a character that doesn't have a lot of spell slots and so they need to get a cantrip that deals damage reliably, and along the way you get the benefit of being able to land critical hits more often. I don't know how good Spell Sniper can be for warlocks that rely on Eldritch Blast, because most of the time I play a warlock, I play the Pact of the Blade version. But if that's the case, then I can see Spell Sniper being especially useful for those warlocks. I don't feel very good about taking a feat just to get a single cantrip with a higher chance of getting a critical hit, but because cantrips are so easy to get in many various different ways, I cannot place Spell Sniper any higher than the B tier. Tavern Brawler makes it so that whenever you make an unarmed attack, use an improvised weapon, or throw something, your strength modifier is added twice to the damage and attack rolls. On top of that, you also get to increase your strength or your constitution. This can be very good for a particular type of character. I can see it being quite good on a barbarian that is all about making improvised weapons and throwing the weapons that are present in their backpacks, rushing at the enemies, and even if they have the weapons, they will use unarmed attacks. Something along those lines. It's not particularly amazing, and throwing your attacks certainly is not going to scale very well into the late game, but it can also be a very fun playstyle, and as far as roleplay, this has got to be one of the better feats, as it allows you to play out a power fantasy that cannot be achieved any other way. Or at least it's not going to be satisfying unless you pick the Tavern Brawler feat. So I think Tavern Brawler ends up being good enough that it deserves to be in the C tier as a situationally good feat, as only a very few specific characters are going to take advantage of it. Next on the list is Tough. Your hit point maximum is increased by 2 for every level you have gained. This is a bit awkward. It sounds amazing in the later levels, as if you are level 12, you will gain 24 HP right away. But at the same time, at the later levels, 24 HP isn't a huge deal as you might think it is. And also at the start, let's say you're level 2, gaining 4 HP might actually be a bigger deal. So I think Tough ends up being relatively better in the early to medium portions of the game, where the enemies don't deal a ton of damage right away. But it can also be a good way to make sure that, for example, a wizard that doesn't have any armor class gets to be a bit more survivable. So in my opinion, Tough is going to be a B tier feat, as it is good but could be better. Warcaster allows you to gain advantage on saving throws to maintain concentration on a spell. You can also use a reaction to cast Shocking Grasp at a target moving out of melee range. Personally, I love Warcaster. At the start of almost every encounter, I have one of my characters cast Bless on the entire party, and because it is a concentration spell, I have to be careful about the enemies not breaking that concentration. And that goes for many other spells that I use, like Hold Person for example. So being able to gain advantage on a saving throw, and also gaining a new spell to use on a reaction, is a very good deal in my opinion. And because concentration spells are so powerful in Baldur's Gate 3, I think Warcaster deserves to be in the S tier. And finally we have Weapon Master. You gain proficiency with 4 weapons of your choice, and you get to increase your strength or your dexterity by 1. So you get to choose 4 weapons that you want to add proficiency to your character out of all the weapons in the game. But here's the thing, the character that I have here is a level 4 fighter that doesn't have any multi-classing, doesn't have any feats, and he is proficient with every weapon in the game. It's very easy to get proficiency with a lot of weapons, especially if you multi-class into fighter or any other martial class, or even if you are a warlock, for example. You can use Pact of the Blade and turn any weapon into a weapon that you have proficiency with. And while being able to choose from strength or dexterity is nice, I just don't think Weapon Master is all that good. I can see its merits, which is why I warrant it being in the C tier as a situationally good feat. Nah, scratch that, I'm placing it in the D tier as a not recommended feat. You can do much better than this. And so these are my rankings for the feats in Baldur's Gate 3. Keep in mind that whenever you're choosing a feat, you're choosing to forego of an ability score improvement, which means you get to add +2 to any ability you choose, which can be a lot more flexible and a lot more powerful depending on the feat you select, which is why I may have been strict with some of these. There's not a lot of flavor or roleplay feats that I have placed high on the list, because in my opinion, if you truly value the roleplay experience, you would just go with the wisdom or a charisma character and you would boost their stats to make them better in that aspect. So at the end of the day, do you agree with me? And if not, let me know why in the comment section below. As always, my name is Dark Hero, thank you very much for all the support on the Baldur's Gate 3 videos, and thank you very much for watching.